I always get the first wave.
Pretty much, it brought me to tears. Like, the wave was so good.
That's the biggest drop I've ever taken in my life.
And so right there, I told myself I needed to just relax and stay calm, that I'm stronger than this.
All right, Mr. Mike Snips Parsons, thanks for coming on the podcast, mate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, stoked to be on it. I've been watching all of them. They've been great, really entertaining, and you've been doing an awesome job. Stoked to be on it.
Yeah, thanks. Last time I was speaking, we were trying to organise it. You were off to the surf ranch. So how was that? I still haven't surfed it. And Makua's there right now. I'm just like, oh man.
I know. I saw Billy was up there too. So you got to get it. It's super fun. It's so much funner to ride that wave than, like, you watch it and you think, okay, it looks really rad and cool, but when you're actually riding it, it's really sick. Such a good time. Yeah, really.
You were there with some of your athletes, right? Just tuning up.
Yeah. Red Bull actually had a day for their athletes, and so I went up with Caroline Marks and got to snivel a couple of waves when they weren't surfing, and it's pretty neat now. They have the lights, so the night's really cool under the lights. When you're in the barrel, it kind of lights up. When you're in the barrel, it's really bitching.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. It's so cool.
Yeah,
a little bit different than you growing up, right? Imagining that would be, although you probably were on tour when there was an event, right? I think Tom Carroll won in like Arizona or something. Is that right? Like somewhere?
Yeah. So Tom Carroll won in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And I surfed in that event. Yeah. Tom won against Derek Ho in the final. I think I lost a rabbit, maybe got ninth place, but it was amazing. That was I also surfed a wave pool in Miyazaki, Japan, when I was probably 20 years old as well, when I was on the tour. So they've come a long way since those first couple of wave pools. It's pretty awesome to see.
That's classic, because if I read correctly, you grew up in Laguna. Is that right?
I did, yeah. I grew up in Three Arch Bay, which is the very south end of Laguna Beach. I went to Laguna Beach High School, but it's a little gated community, and bunch of us loved surfing growing up there, a little private beach, so it was just an epic place to grow up.
Yeah, because Laguna, I'm pretty familiar with that area. My wife's from Newport, but it seemed like Laguna's probably in that zone. It's sort of like pretty protected in there, right? There's not a lot of waves. I mean, probably good for growing up, but it seems like a lot of the swells just come and hit the shore break, right? Like there's nothing really, it's not really, but you got so many good waves. You got your Newport to the north and Salt Creek and everything to the south, so I'm sure that there was plenty of waves.
Yeah, there was. I mean, Laguna has its moments in town. There's like Thalia Reef and Brook Street. That was one of the first contests I ever did, was an event at Brook Street, which is a good left off a reef. But you're right, most of the waves are pretty shore breaky. Where I grew up at Three Arch Bay, it's real shore breaky surf, but it actually taught me some pretty good skills early, because it's like really steep drops. And so like it was kind of like we always said, if you could surf at Three Arch Bay, it'd be easy when you went to Creek or Trestles or Newport or places like that, because the drops were super steep. And we had a good little crew, and occasionally it gets really fun down there, and it's little private beach, so we had it all to ourselves. It was just an epic place to grow up.
Yeah, so you were at 6 when you started surfing, Reed, right?
Yeah, I started surfing at 6 years old at San Onofre. My dad was a real avid surfer. He surfed Creek and San Onofre every day. And so, yeah, he got me into it really young. My first contest was at San Onofre. I surfed in the 8 and under division there. Just awesome memories. A really good crew of young families down there on the beach at Sano. Not a lot has changed. It's still incredible. You can still drive your car right up on the beach and paddle out. Just an epic family spot. Kind of the Waikiki of California, really.
Yeah, I was about to say, it sort of reminds me of Makaha. You know how you can sort of like drive up, you back the truck on, you're there for the whole day, you're barbecuing, it's real family orientated. I mean, obviously there's a few discrepancies there, but but like it's sort of like when I've been to San Onofre, it really takes me back to those like special times that I've had at Makaha, whether it's like Buffs contest or just being able to go out there and hang out for the day. It's sort of like, that's sort of what it took me back to.
Yeah, it's really cool. They still have the San Onofre Surf Club. My dad was a big part of that. So, it's an awesome group of old surfers that, go down. You got guys that are 85 years old out there still ripping on longboards. And it just has that atmosphere. It's really relaxed compared to right to the north. You got like Lowers, which is the most aggro wave on the coast, and probably one of the best waves on the coast as well. So that whole area between Sano and really Cottons is just an amazing stretch of surf, and really the reason I live in California is for this little stretch right here in San Clemente.
Yeah, and then so it seemed like you were pretty exposed. Obviously, I mean, Southern California, you know, you're exposed to, if you're near the beach or you're surfing or you love surfing, you're pretty exposed to a lot of it, and you know, sponsorship, blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. But like, when did you said you started doing contests pretty early? Was that just purely, you know, you're going to school? Was there a surf club at the school, or just your friends were doing it and it's just like sort of you're at the beach anyway and that's just was sort of the path growing up?
Well, it was funny because I growing up in Laguna, I entered the Brook Street contest, and I ended up winning this contest, and I won. I was on a 6'8" single fin, and a lot of the kids were on shorter boards, and I was like, in Pure Arch Bay, we had a couple of older guys that influenced me that all rode bigger boards and surfed in Hawaii. So I thought, like, okay, this is what I ride. And then I won a board, and they said, you have to get a twin fin. So I got this twin fin that was actually, it was called Green Lantern Surfboards, and I got a little 5'2" twin fin or something, or 5'6" maybe. And so then I was like, wow, this is really fun. And I told my dad I want to start doing more contests. And right about that time, Ian Cairns and Peter Town had just come from Australia and started the NSSA. And so I entered my first event in Huntington. And I remember going to that event, and I didn't know anybody. I just went with my dad. I paddled out. I rode a bunch of waves. I thought I did pretty good. I came in. They didn't see a single one of my waves. I got last place. I went home in the car, like crying to my dad, like, I don't know if contests are for me, Dad. And he was like, no, you got to stick with it. And so, but Ian and PT were a great influence on me. And in high school, I started doing the NSSA, and I started getting some results. And next thing you know, I was getting close to making the team, and I was meeting friends and going with all my friends from Pure Arch Bay. And it was just an amazing time to be a young surfer in California. We had contests every weekend, and super good, healthy activity, and really just set me on the path to being a pro surfer and basically surfing for the rest of my life. That was the beginning for sure.
Yeah, it seems like you had a great, seemed like your dad, just from the conversation already, seemed like he was super supportive, and your family was supportive. And I mean, that's massive, right? When you've got a family or family member that's willing to drive you, support you, and encourage you to do that. I mean, because it seems to me, knowing you pretty well too, that you would have done pretty well at school. I imagine you were, pretty astute student. And I had a tough time with English, and I had to actually go to a special school at first. So I think that actually, in a weird way, I think that played into why I was sort of got into the big wave thing. Was I always felt like, because actually I went to this special school because I was really terrible at English. And when I came back to the regular school, a couple of the kids would make fun of me and go, oh, that's that kid who struggles in school or whatever. So I was like, the one thing about surfing, especially bigger waves, I was like, well, no one can tell me I can't do this or I'm no good at it. So I felt like that played a role in sort of me being the crazy kid. I'd be like, well, I'll bomb the hill higher than you on my skateboard, or I'll catch a bigger wave. And because I was really actually not very good in school in the beginning, but I went to this really great school my parents sent me to, and I hated it. I was so mad at them for making me do it, but I actually learned to read a little bit different way. And so yeah, that was sort of in looking back at it, was really beneficial to my whole career. And so yeah, it was this area though, I think, for growing up and the influence I had. My parents were great, super supportive. My dad took a loan out on our house so I could go to Australia for my first trip there. I went to Bali in Australia in the early 80s with the NSSA team. We didn't have much money, but he made that happen by getting a loan. So they were really supportive. And that was just, like you said, that's such an important thing, I think, as a young kid, to have that family support and have your parents that into it and saying, hey, you can do this. And that really paid off for me. Yeah, it's interesting. That's really interesting that the learning thing was nearly a driving factor to prove a point, growing up, because everyone's a little different. Like, the stories are the same. Like, when I asked Mark Healy, it's like, well, my dad took me to Waimea Rock and just threw me off when I was 5 years old. And you're like, okay, like I can understand why you got to screw loose, you know. And then
Yeah.
and then I had Shane Dorian on the podcast last week, and he was saying his dad didn't watch him surf ever, you know, and so his drive was nearly to get out of the house and to prove him wrong, you know. So everyone has their own little way of you know, because like even to look at you this day, it would be hard to see like Mike Pass as the crazy guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, totally.
It's sort of like, you know, but there's a common denominator. There's always something. There's always a pivotal moment in your life that you sort of look back on and go, that was a changing moment of who I was or who I became in that adolescence age.
Yeah, it's so true. It really was in my case. It was kind of like I really had something to prove. Like, well, I know I can be brave, and that was like that came easy to me. I was like, I'm gonna be the crazy kid because some of these other kids are making fun of me. So it was like had a little bit of an axe to grind for sure. And it's funny that everyone's got their own little story. Like you said, what's yours? Because you're definitely got some screws loose.
Yeah, I think my dad was. I think I'm a splitting image of my dad. My dad was, he played professional rugby, he surfed, and he was pretty just full on as well. And I just remember him taking me to the beach at a young age, and he'd put me on the front of his, like a wave ski and take me out and bomb waves. And I think he was just really, he wasn't scared to make me scared in a way. And he probably got away with it without scaring me too much. You know, that there's that fine line, you know, and I had him, you know, your father's your role model if he's a good father, and my father was a great father, and he was tough on me too, right? So I think I got my toughness and all that stuff. And, you know, I've been thinking about this a little bit. I think back at like, because right now I don't really like, you know, if I'm in a crowd or I'm somewhere, like I sort of like to sit back and nearly be invisible in a way, but the things that you do or we've done, or I mean, I've done back in the day when I was growing up as a teenager, I was nearly like an exhibitionist. Like I wanted to be the guy like that everyone was looking at. You know, like, oh, Jamie jumped off this, or he did that, or he did that. But now it's nearly the opposite. You know, I think it's that phase of getting older where it's not trying to maybe prove the point or being happy at where you're at in your life, because definitely back then it was the ego, and you know, as a 17, 18-year-old, it was like, hey, look at me, I'm the man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a completely different stage of life now. It's, when I think back, I'm like, wow, like, it's interesting.
Yeah, I feel the same exact way. I think I wanted the biggest wave of the day. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to be the guy that everyone was talking about. I wanted to get the shot on the biggest wave. And like, it's funny how over time and obviously, you know, age, you pull back and you start to, now I really enjoy it. I think I was probably 30 years old when I really started to realize and see like, hey, there's consequences here, you know, and starting to pull back and don't have to be the guy. And I think a lot of that comes just with getting that security about yourself, right? Like you start to feel good about some of the things you've done, or you feel a little more accepted, and you're not so much out to prove a point.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And everyone's going to get there eventually. So,
yeah.
So you said back in the 80s, and I see that in 83, I think you were second place in the junior US championships, was it? Or the junior division in the US surfing championships, 18?
Yeah, that was actually in Texas in the US championships. I got second place. Yeah. And then shortly after, I think that was when I was making the NSSA team and we started to travel. The first world titles I went to, Tom Curran was the only American on the team. And we went to Australia shortly after that and supported him. And I got to surf in Australia for the first time, but that was right around that same time period.
Yeah, it was 80. I've done some research, but I think it was 84. And from what it was the first time Australia had ever been beaten by, you know, in the amateur titles, and you guys were the first ones to do that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was an awesome trip. I remember we got off the plane and there was all these newspapers like saying there's no way the Aussies could lose, and you know, they hadn't heard too much about Tom Curran, but a little bit. We also had just a really good team there, and obviously we had awesome coaches with PT and Ian, and Tom went on to win that world titles there and really cemented his name in American surfing. And then, of course, shortly after, he went on to make the tour, and a bunch of us did. So that was a real pivotal time. I think that group of surfers to this day, that NSSA team of 82, 83, 84, that time frame, if you look at the names on that list, a lot of them went on to be incredible surfers or have careers in surfing.
Yeah, was that like with Chris Brownie and all that? Yeah, that was. You would nearly say that's like. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, Chloe and Griffin but like back then, you nearly look at that as the golden years of California surfing, like back in the 80s. You know, we had the Bud Light, you had the tour. There's a lot of stuff going on, right?
Yeah, it felt like it. That team had just so much talent with Tom Curran and Chris Frohoff, Ted Robinson, Kelly Gibson, Scott Farnsworth, Gary Clisby. Just an amazing group. All guys who went on to either make the tour or, like I said, have careers. Richard Wolcott, who started Volcom, was on that team. So it was just a real special group. Kim Merrick was on it. She went on to be world champ from Santa Barbara. So it was a cool time, and we got to go to Hawaii as a team as well. And that's where I sort of first started surfing bigger waves at Sunset with that same team, Haliva, and just getting that experience with that group was amazing.
Yeah, that's cool, because I wanted to like sort of transition into that, because I'm wondering when, you obviously probably growing up, there's no such thing as really probably a professional big wave surfer, and obviously you know big waves is part of surfing. You want to be good at it, but your focus, I'm guessing, at 18 and being in all these teams is, the ASP tour comes along. It's like, hey, I want to be a pro surfer, get on tour. But I'm wondering, like, was it that Hawaii trip where you started to get those bigger waves? I know Pete Mel said the same thing. He remembers a certain wave at Sunset where he kicked out and went, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Like, I'm wondering when that moment was for you. But interesting enough too, because then you've got to put that away because the focus is actually going to surf small waves.
Yeah, it's funny. It was weird. It definitely that moment for me. I grew up in Three Arch Bay, and during some of those big El Nino years at that beach, we used to try to challenge ourselves and make it out and hide behind these rocks just as Groms. And I always loved the challenge of trying to figure out the ocean and go out on days when everyone thought we were crazy as kids to try to go out. But then we went to Hawaii with the NSSA team, and we started surfing Sunset. And I remember getting the letter from PT and Ian that said, "Hey, you need to bring a 7'4" surfboard in your quiver." And we were like, "What?" We had never heard of a board that big over here. So I got a board. I got a single fin from Bill Barnfield, shaped over there, and awesome guy, great shaper. And so we started surfing Sunset. I started surfing Sunset on a 7'4" single fin at maybe 17 years old. And that kind of like Pete, a light went off. I was like, this is cool. Like, you're way out in the ocean. There's these shifty peaks. You get caught inside, and just the excitement and the adrenaline, and just I was really drawn to that. And later on in my career, I wound up doing really good at Sunset competitively because for those same reasons, I just loved sort of competing against the elements instead of against another competitor. I always felt, when you're just competing against the ocean and the other stuff, as you know, riding big waves and big wave contests, it just goes out the door. It's really about you and the ocean, and I always loved that dynamic. Yeah.
And so when did you actually get on tour? So if you're 17, 18, what's that in 1980? Is that around that 1983, 84 time? So when does Mike? Because I know you surfed about 8 years on tour, if that's if I'm correctly.
Yeah, a little bit longer. So I did about 10. I actually went from about 84 on the tour to 96, so about 12 years. So 1984, we had the World Amateur titles at Huntington Beach, which I surfed in, and that was my last sort of amateur event. And our team went on to win. Scott Farnsworth won the overall from our team, and I won the grand final that day against my really good friend Dave McCauley in the final.
Yeah.
From Australia, and Gary Elkerton was kind of the superstar of that team, and so that was my last amateur event. And then I went straight on the tour that year. I went to France for my first trip, and then on to England, and then eventually back to California and on the tour from that day on. So pretty much from I was 19 years old, even late 18s, I was on the tour and did it for 12 years.
Did you, now, when did, like, say, I'm guessing that Todos was one of your first sort of big wave missions, you know, out when I'm talking big wave, we're talking like not blacks, not big local stuff. We're talking like legit waves. Like, is that during that time of being a pro, or, you know, you're in the winter time when, you know, you start to shuffle off and, you know, push yourself during that time as well?
It was at the exact same time frame. So we would come home from Hawaii in December each year, right around that same time frame. And Larry Moore of Surfing Magazine, the photo editor, great guy, and big influence in my life. He would say, hey, there's this spot in Mexico. And we would just look at the buoys in Hawaii, or even get phone calls from Hawaii. And 2 days after Waimea was big, we would just go to Todos.
Yeah.
The forecasting was just beginning. Sean Collins was just starting to get good information, and we started going to Todos. And that was definitely where I learned to ride a real big surfboard. And it was an amazing time. It was super uncrowded there. It was pretty much just 5 or 6 guys, whoever you went with. Brock Little used to come over a lot from Hawaii. Todd Chesser, even later on, Mark Fu would come over a lot. But there was a group of us from here in California that would go on every swell. And that was our little stomping ground, just 3-hour drive from my house. And we'd catch a boat out of the harbor there. And that's where I really learned about big waves. It's, as you know, Todos is so much like Waimea. It's just it breaks really in the same area. You can ride it from 5 feet all the way up to 25 feet. It's just an incredible spot, and amazing place to learn how to ride bigger boards and big waves.
Yeah, and then when did the mindset of maybe that, you know, the end of your career on the pro tours starting to happen, and then did you, like, at that stage you're sponsored by Billabong, like, did you have a plan to go to them and go, hey, like, I want to you know, get into big waves and start chasing swells? Was there a moment? Because I remember Shane saying the same thing. He sort of went with a proposal saying, hey, I'm sort of over this competing and this and that, but I really want to challenge myself, and I've got goals that I want to achieve in big waves, and sort of went to Billabong with a proposal, and they're like, hey, yeah, you know, go for it.
Yeah, I had a pretty similar story, actually. I was working for a little bit after doing the tour. Some friends of mine, we were working, we started that VonZipper, which is still going strong today in sunglasses. And we actually sold the company to Billabong. And it was 7 of us that started the company. And at that time, Paul Nade, who's an awesome dude, and he runs Vizsla and Sister now. But at the time he was running Billabong, and he came to me and said, hey, why don't you come and surf for us? We're starting this adventure division. I want you to be involved in that and travel the world and surf. And we're going to do this project, the Billabong Oddysey, which is a movie they wanted to make. So I was like, whoa, where do I sign up for that? Like, that was just, you know, the light just went on. Like, I felt like thank you. Second shot at this. And so I was really fortunate with that opportunity. And we got to, from that moment on, that was, you know, my early 30s, that time frame, from the probably 98, 99 to 2008 or 2010. That was the window I was just able to just chase the world and chase waves on every swell everywhere.
Yeah, and prime time for, like, being a man, probably in great shape. You're mentally probably there too. Everything else in your life is sort of like hopefully out of it. You know, you can you know fixate on that. But yeah, because 98 was the you guys had that's when Taylor got that bomb at Todos. You guys had the world. It was like a world's team challenge, right? Like, so each nation had 2 surfers, and you guys went out and competed in that. Tell us about that event.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. It was a really big year. I think it was the 98 was an El Nino year. And me and Taylor had been surfing Todos a lot that same year. And the day they had it was like a south wind morning. And I was like, oh no, it's going to be bad. But it just went southeast enough, the wind, and that was a huge swell, really west in direction. And as you know, that's perfect for Todos. And it was really fun to watch Taylor get that wave. Me and Brock Little were sitting in the channel, and he just had a wipeout on his wave before. And we were kind of heckling and going, "Come on, Taylor!" And he's one of those guys that if you just go to him, he's going to go. So he got sort of pissed, and the next wave was his. I guess it was measured in like 55 feet or something like that. And at the time, it was just the most incredible drop. I think paddle surfing that pretty much maybe a few rides at Waimea were better, but it was right in that same realm with a Waimea wave. So it was like it really put Todos on the map, and that event was kind of the beginning of at that time it was called the K2 Challenge, where surfers got paid for the biggest wave of the year. So that was really the start of the Big Wave Awards as we know it. That was the first year that was held, and Taylor was paid I think 52 grand for every foot of the wave.
Yeah. 50, was it 55 or 52? Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, that wave at Todos still holds like to one of the best waves ever paddled still, really. Like if you look at it, for sure, I think. Yeah,
Todos is amazing. Once Mavericks was discovered a little bit later and became into the spotlight, Todos was a little bit forgotten about. Sort of similar to what happened with Waimea and Jaws, but as you know, like they all pack a punch, right? I mean, Todos can get your attention like any other wave in the world. And the thing about Todos that's amazing is it stands so straight up tall. It photographs really well. It's really a vertical drop where even sometimes at Mavericks or Jaws, the wave can be, a fair bit bigger and it's a bit slopier, but Todos just goes straight up and down for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, I think that that swell in 07, the toe swell at Mavs and Ghost Trees, that was like that swell was so west, it was nearly like bordering on south. There was south in it, nearly felt like. And we decided to go to Todos the next day and chase that down there. And to that day, that was still some of the biggest surf I've ever been in to try and paddle. Like even with all the Jaws stuff now, that day was freaking, and it was because it was so west, right? And it would just amplified everything. And I saw some crazy waves that day. It was incredible. It just seems like, I said it just seems like we get less pure west swells these days, So Todos, we haven't seen a really, really good big Todos day for a while.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's crazy. It needs to be really west for Todos to get like that. I remember that swell really well. I went out that same day too. I wound up me and Brad were at Ghost Trees the day before, and we drove all night. I remember you getting some really good waves that morning. I was super tired and terrified, but I do remember paddling out like midday that day, and I paddled over a wave with Greg Long, and both of us like barely scratched over this thing, and that was it. I just paddled straight to the boat and went, it was as big as I've ever seen it that day. That was gnarly. I remember Mark Healy got a couple of ridiculous waves.
Yeah, there's a couple of cool photos that I've got that just were all scratching up the face of these waves. And I got a good buddy of mine, Billy Watson. He's down the bottom. And I remember Andrew Ma from South Africa was there. And we got through it somehow. And he's like, Jamie goes, I think your friend just died, because he just got sucked over. And this is pre-flotation, no pool vest, anything. And by the time we found him, he was on the rocks, board destroyed. He was just waiting for a lull to jump off and try and get to the jet ski.
I remember that. I remember that actual set. That was incredible. Yeah, Todos you're right. We haven't had a day like that in, at least, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years since we've had a really incredible day out there.
Yeah. But I want to go back to Gur, because that's a really big part of your history, big wave, and just the whole, it's such a funny, and I think it's obviously been documented before, but seems like two totally different personalities. And you guys didn't really like each other while on tour, from what I've read. But how did that relationship come together to where you go from not really liking each other to trusting your life to this guy,
Yeah, he's one of my best friends I've ever had too. Best guy ever. But it's funny, we didn't like each other on tour. We were both really competitive, and we didn't really run in the same circles. He had a few friends that he did the tour with, Jeff Novak and Dave Kennedy, and I was traveling with Chris Frohoff, Taylor Knox, those kind of guys. So we didn't really run in the same circles, and we just butted heads a little bit in the early days too in the NSSA. And it's funny because he was really good friends with Taylor Knox, and so was I, and we started going to Todos. And next thing you know, I would be going on the boat with Brad and the three of us. And I was like, man, this guy's so funny and so much cooler than I thought when we were doing the tour. And we just started becoming really good friends that way, surfing at Todos, really. And then sort of the jet ski thing, Pete, Mel, and Skin Dog got a ski, and I saw Laird and Dave Kalama and Double D and those guys in Hawaii, what they were doing right around that same time. So I got a ski in, I think, 98. So I was like, okay, who am I going to do this with? Like, who really is like kind of into this stuff? And I was like, man, Brad seems like he's really into it. And he was out there a few times at Toto. So we started going tow surfing together and actually doing step offs on smaller days and getting barreled. And that's really how it kind of started. And then we just became addicted to Todos and going out there on every swell. And then, so yeah, that's how our friendship sort of grew. And I think the greatest time of my life as a surfer was that time frame, like right after the tour, right when I started hanging out with Brad and that 10-year run with Billabong. And me and Brad went all over the world together chasing waves and filming for that movie, and just incredible memories. The thing about Brad is you can go, no matter what, you're going to laugh your ass off all day, every day. And the other thing about him is everywhere we went, he was like the best surfer out. And he's such a good surfer that it was insane to be with someone that good. It sort of pushed me to, because Brad was always a better surfer than me and had more natural talent. And he's also really analytical, and he'd always be trying to help me. And as you know, he's a really good coach now at surfing. But yeah, epic times. And it sucks now because he lives in Australia and I live over here. I don't see him quite as much, but we still talk on the phone quite a bit, and still look forward to riding some big waves with him again.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I think there's nothing better, and I think it's the perfect timing, like for when you transition, like it became the World Teams event, the Billabong Oddysey, the Double XL Awards. It all just sort of blew up as you were transitioning into big waves. And I remember when I bought my first ski with my partner, and you just, it's like this. It's like you've been reborn again. Like you've got all this stuff to learn. You're like, for us in Australia as a young kid, like I'm watching Making the Call and the Odyssey and all Kurt Myers is the power line, whipped biggest, 100-foot Wednesday. And there's just so much, the Laird movie, there's just so much knowledge to be done. And I was on the Gold Coast, right? It's like, where do you learn how to tow surf on the Gold Coast, but I think it's such a cool thing to learn with someone. There's the fighting, there's the screaming, like, you suck, you put me in shit waves, fuck you, like, it's just like, and then you have those moments where it's just like, you're by yourself somewhere and you're scoring perfect waves and you look around, it's just you and your buddy, and you're like, oh my God, like, this is like a fairy tale, this is like a dream, and what a great time, like, to have, because there's those moments with you, like, I think that's so cool, like with the Making the Call DVD, that Surfline. And I want to get back to that as well, because you have a really, a gift and a passion for looking at the maps. And I know you had a good relationship with Sean Collins, rest in peace, Sean. So I'd like to get back to that. But talking about Brad, that story, when you guys were at Jaws, that famous wave in the Jaws contest, and he's talking about whipping you in on Nifty. And he's like, wow, 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 wow. Like that's such a cool story and such a cool wave. But let's just go back to, like, when did you start to really get into forecasting and really, because people are into forecasting, like I'm into forecasting, but guys like you and Pete sort of, to me, have gone to another level of it, so yeah, I'd like to know when that sort of came into your peripheral.
Yeah, pretty much that same time frame, like late 98 to 2000. Sean Collins was running Surfline, and I became very good friends with him. We went on a lot of trips to Baja together, just surfing some, Misto Point breaks, and I started picking his brain a lot. And he was also helping me with whenever Todos was good, or Hawaii or Tahiti or Fiji or wherever we were going. And so, yeah, he started. I started hanging out with him a lot, and I was just that student, really just going, hey, how do you know? What do you do? What do you look at?
Sponge.
Yeah, just a sponge. What's bathymetry? What's swell period? And he really, I think, was stoked that someone was that interested. So I felt really lucky to be come along at that time when there wasn't a ton of good information really yet, and I had access to him. And I know Laird did, and Kelly Slater did through his whole career. And a certain crew of guys were kind of his guys that he would give the info to, and we kept scoring because he was giving us such good info on.
Well, can you imagine that's your job, right? Your job is to chase swells, get the perfect position, like, you know, the forecast. Like, it's like having someone give you the cheat test for the school. You know, it's just
totally.
you've got the inside scoop when, you know, like, you know, Snips is going that way and smoke bombing that way, and the guys are scoring that way.
Yeah, it was rad to be a part of that time frame. And then, you know, I just over time I got really into it and used all the sites and started really digging into, you know, watching swells, photographing what they did, like, you know, like we do nowadays. You like kind of document each swell, and Surfline does such a good job at it now. But you can go back to the history of each swell, and it's pretty much a guarantee, right? You know exactly what you're looking for now. So that was always fun to me. I also got my pilot's license about 16 years ago, and so, you know, weather's a huge thing for that. So I was always into the weather for that as well, and trying to pick days when I could fly in Baja and stuff when the weather would be good, and learning more and more about storms and weather and patterns. And so it just always really intrigued me.
That's awesome. Yeah. So 2001 was the Cortez year, right? When you guys did the first. Take us through that, you know, because obviously I know Larry Flame Moore had been flying out, and he obviously had told you guys about this wave out there, and then, you know, with Sean as well, I guess you guys were waiting for that perfect day.
It's funny because he actually, Larry Moore started photographing it in 1990, so 10 years prior, and he had sat on these photos for that long. He actually showed me the photos years before we ever went there, and we actually tried to go paddle surf it before skis. I went on a boat with Rob Brown and Larry Moore, and we got out to San Clemente Island, and the wind shifted really strong northwest, and we came back in. We never went. So we tried to get there, and then this one, the 2001 swell, January 19th, was the one where Pete and Skinny had their ski, and we had ours, and Larry called me and said, "Hey, Pete and Skin Dog are going to come down. We're getting this boat, and we're going to Cortez." And me and Brad were like, "Oh my God, this is going to be insane." And it was in around the time the Mavericks event was supposed to happen. So I know Pete and them were worried about that, and it all sort of came together last minute. And yeah, that was the I'd have to say that's the best day surfing of my life to this day. It was a high pressure Santa Ana wind, so we had northeast winds all day. Had a long period swell that was pretty west, so the inside bowl at Cortez, or the in bowl, was really good and standing straight up. And that was the most sort of adventurous surf trip I've ever been on, because we didn't know what to expect. You know, it had been surfed before, paddle surfed on a smaller day years before, but it was like, I mean, it was the closest thing I've ever done to be like going to the moon or whatever. Like, we had no idea, like, where do we line up with, what do we do? And I'll never forget that morning seeing the waves when it was dark and misty, and in the distance you could just see these top to bottom tunnels, like almost like when you're coming from Tavarua Island and you're going to Cloudbreak on a big day, and you just see these tunnels roping down the reef. It looked like that at Cortez, and sheet glass, but it was still kind of dark. And as the sun came up, I was like, oh my God, there's huge perfect waves out there, and we're the only people here. It was like, it was just a dream. Like, I mean, we were on equipment that would, you know, I was on a 7.2 tow board, and Pete was on a John Carper tow board as well, that I think was 7.2 or 7.4. And it was just the beginning of that technology, but it was like a light went on after we surfed that day. Brad tells amazing stories about it, like the first time you're ever able to control a board on waves that big, and it was really a special day.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, because I mean, we still to this day, like, you know, jumping on the boat from the harbour at Maui and getting the Jaws, and the first look in the morning, you're like, oh my God, it's perfect, but there's going to be 1,000 guys, you know, like, I can't imagine, yeah, just going out, and it's just like Everest, you know, and it's just like, oh, this is 60, 70 feet and perfect, and we're the only guys out. Like, what an incredible moment.
It really was. And it's crazy that, you know, Sean Collins and Larry Moore were so instrumental in that trip happening, and all the work leading up to it. And yeah, it felt like a victory for all of us. I was just as stoked for those guys as I was for us that got to surf it, because so much work went into that behind the scenes, and I just felt like that was a moment in time that you'll never get again. It was like like a discovery, and it was there is obviously waves that haven't been surfed yet still out there. There's amazing big waves to be discovered, but one that good that can hold waves that big, and it's just like, holy cow, this has been under our nose.
And right off the coast of San Clemente, you know what I mean? Like it's not like it's somewhere halfway across the world. It's just like right there, Right there. I mean, I took my wetsuit off midnight a few times in Dana Point Harbor. I was surfing the biggest waves I've ever surfed. I mean, that was like, growing up, it was Hawaii, and there was no such thing as huge waves like that here. And then also it's been out there the whole time. And that was the year that Walla and Evan got cleaned up? They tried to paddle out, right? That's the same trip, yeah? Same trip. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, John Walla, I think he was maybe 22 years old. He was the captain of the boat, and Evan was pretty rambunctious himself to try to paddle out. Those guys were awesome, and they got smoked by a big west set. It was gnarly. We were looking for them, and boards were everywhere, and it was pretty gnarly. I mean, you've paddled out there. It's such a hard wave to paddle and line up, and it takes we didn't have any safety back then. We had old school life vests that had just came out, and those guys were paddling without vests and everything, just absolutely nuts. Yeah, I actually met John Waller because he's a fireman now, right, in Dana Point, I'm pretty sure. I have a friend who's a fireman there. He took me to the firehouse, and he just happened to be working there, so I got to meet him. That was pretty cool because I'd heard that story, and so it was nice to meet him. So, but they 66 foot wave that day. I mean, I think you just reposted that photo a while back, and I remember commenting on it because I'm like, that thing looks a lot bigger than 66 feet. But that day, you must have seen giant waves. Like, and then I think there were even like those waves that you guys got that weren't even documented, right? Because the waves in front of the waves, it's so hard to get in between the swells and the boat. So, I mean, you must have saw stuff that's etched in your mind that hasn't even been documented. Yeah, it for sure. And that there was another day actually in 2008 that we went back, and that was the swell I went with Greg Long and Twiggy and myself and Brad, and that was the biggest waves I've ever seen in my life. That was January 5th, I think, of 2008, and that was one of those swells where we were kind of in between big swells and rain, and we left the harbor really late in the day. Me and Greg were like, let's go, let's not go, all night talking to each other on the phone. What's it going to be like? And Sean Collins was saying, hey, it looks like it's going to be too stormy. It's going to be the biggest ever. I don't know if I would go, you guys. The buoys were nuts. And so we actually just said, let's go for it. We just want to see. Yeah. So we went on Rob Brown's boat, just the four of us. And that was the day. I think Greg Long may have ridden the biggest wave ever ridden that wasn't documented. And I still feel bad for him that it wasn't documented, because he actually got two, I think, that were bigger than the wave that I got. And Twiggy got some huge ones. Brad got some huge ones. But that was the biggest surf I've ever seen. There was definitely waves that we wanted no part of tow surfing. And usually you're just like, come on, give me the biggest one ever. And there were waves that were doubling up. And it was a pretty nasty afternoon. And it was, that was probably the biggest surf I've ever seen. Yeah, that was, I think they claimed your wave at 77 feet and became the Guinness Book of World Records for the biggest wave ever surfed. And that I got it mixed up. That was the wave that I saw, and I remember looking at it going, maybe still to this day, like the biggest wave, really. Like when you really look at it, and it's weird because everyone judges waves differently, and we all know how big Nazare is, and it's just it's a different looking style. It's a little bit more slopey from the front angle, but then when you're out there, it's steep and hollow. But that, for whatever reason, that photo at Cortez, it just makes that wave look. When it looks so clean, when the water's blue and it looks pristine, something about that makes the wave look even bigger and better, I think. Yeah, and that swell had huge periods in it, like 22 seconds, and it makes it really draw off the reef. And same as Jaws, it just goes vertical.
So yeah, that was a special wave. I remember kicking out of that wave, and Greg Long drove up to me on the ski and was screaming and yelling, and like, you know, when you're on the wave, you know it's friggin' big, and you're like, oh my God, don't fall. This is a insane wave, but you don't know how big. And he was just going, oh my God, wait, if he got a photo of that, that was unbelievable. And I'll never forget his expression. Sometimes you don't really realize until you see your friend's expressions, and I'll never forget that moment. And driving home from that trip was another pretty special day. We basically, that time I felt like, whoa, we pulled that off, and because we were really stupid. We had no rescue. We were basically like, hey, let's try to keep an eye on each other. But there was stuff going on out there that day that like we could have drowned pretty easily, any little mistake, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing now how you would
approach that.
Well, I mean, look at the Greg situation later. You know, like, I mean, look at all the safety and all the protocol and all that, and then something did happen. It goes to show you that, okay, well, then you did need it, but, you know, you look at then, you go, what you did back in the day, and you're like, oh my God, like we dodged 10 bullets doing that.
Big time. Yeah, I that was one of those days I felt like I dodged a bullet. I remember my wife was pregnant at the time, and I was like, I remember I had a wipe out and I was rolling underwater, and it was one of those times where you're just like, okay, is this ever going to end? And I remember thinking I should probably stop doing this one of these is not going to end well. I feel like I've had a few of those where I got away, like escaped, and maybe shouldn't have. And after a while, you start to realize like one of these times might get me if I keep doing this.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about Mavericks, Mike? I'd like to know the evolution for you for Mavericks, because I know that was a place where, as a Californian, you know, when that place blew up, it was like, oh my God, another giant, gnarly big wave in our backyard. So when did you hear about it? When was your first time out there? How did that all come together? Yeah,
so I remember the cover came out. I forget who was on it, but it had this discovery and the photo of Mavericks. And in 1993, I think it was. No, it wouldn't have been 93. Yeah, maybe 93. So that was a winter that was an amazing run of surf. We were surfing at Todos, and it was like the 5th day of swell. It was offshore, and it was actually the day Mark Fu passed away. And we went up there the night before. I went with Rob Brown. I had talked to Mark Fu on the phone. I knew he was coming. Ken Bradshaw was coming over. I went with Evan Slater, and we went out on a boat early in the morning. It was my first time surfing Mavericks. It was perfect, like 15-foot, sunny offshore. And I got a couple of waves. There were only 3 or 4 people out. I was blown away. I was like, this wave is incredible. I couldn't believe how much the bottom dropped out when you took off. And I was so used to Todos. And I was riding a 10-foot board, which was a little longer for me. So had a couple of good ones in the morning. And then of course, I was involved in the Mark Fu story pretty heavily. And it was a radical memory. It was the first time it really changed sort of the course of my life, really. And it was the first time I realized that there's big time consequences to what we're doing. And so what happened was about 11 in the morning, we'd all been out there. Mark and Ken Bradshaw paddled out. There was kind of a long lull. We were all joking around. I remember Mark talking about how his girlfriend was going to be upset that it was 2 days before Christmas. And we were all kind of laughing about, like we'll chase waves even on Christmas Day, whatever, like typical. And we were having just such an epic day and laughing about all that stuff. And then this set came through. It was a long lull. And I remember thinking, I missed a couple waves. I was really determined to get one. So the wave I went for, Brock was behind me. And I remember going, I'm committed. I'm going. I know someone's behind me. Try not to get in their way. I remember getting in the air, and I fell backwards, and the lip just went through my stomach. Wasn't a huge wave. It was probably a 15-foot wave, but it was really, really jacked on the ledge. And I remember being pounded onto the bottom, and I was rolling around, tumbling around. And then actually Mark Fu was banging into me underwater. He had taken the wave before, and I didn't know it was Mark. At the time, my first instinct was, oh, my God, I hope Brock's okay, because I felt Mark banging into me, but he wasn't fighting for his life. He was already unconscious because he just thumped into me, his arm, and bang, bang. And I was thinking, oh my God. And when I surfaced, I saw Brock surface right next to me, and I was like, oh my God, that was the heaviest thing ever. I'm so stoked you're okay. And we were both looking at each other. And it was our first time at Mavericks, and we made the idiotic mistake of paddling like we were going to go around the left, and the swell was really west. We didn't know. So we thought we could eke around the left. So we started paddling this way, and another set was coming in. And then we quickly realized, no way, we were going against the current, and we turned around the other way. And then we got blown into the rocks, right? And I remember looking at Brock going, we're in a world of hurt right now, buddy. And we just started banging into those rocks. And I was covering my head, getting blasted against the big one. And then I just tumbled through, and we both wound up on the little shelf in there on the inside. Like, what an intro to Mavericks, right? We just got smoked, both of us. And I remember standing on the rocks, and my legs just collapsed. I couldn't even stand. I was so, oxygen, like I was just done. And we didn't really talk much about it. And we paddled back to the boat. And there's some footage of me on the boat talking, and I just kept saying how I couldn't come up. And someone asked me, well, what happened to Fu? And that question actually came up, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And I was just so happy. I thought Brock was okay.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I sat on the boat. Brock caught another wave, and then we decided, okay, the wind came up, let's bail. And we figured Mark just went in, right? We were like, oh, he must have just went in. So as we turned on the boat, I'll never forget, it all just hit me. I looked, saw his board floating. As we started to drive out to it, way outside, on our way back to the harbor, we saw his board. And
So
I
like
just,
way like in the channel, like down towards
yeah, and outside.
Wow.
And it all just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, I was bumping into Mark Fu. He's still attached to that board, and it's been an hour and a half. And oh my God! And we just raced full speed. I'm getting the chills of telling the story. It was so gnarly. We got to him. Mark was attached to the board, face down. Evan Slater jumped in the water, got him up on the boat. I mean, he was in our lap. We tried to, he was full of water.
Yeah.
He was gone. It was just radical. So we started CPR, called the Coast Guard. They jumped on, took over the CPR. They tried for about an hour, another hour on the dock, and that was it. Just unbelievable.
That's crazy that he was not seen attached
For
to
that
the
long.
board, and because he must have floated through the channel.
Must have floated, right through the channel and out past everyone. By that time there was probably 15 people out, and but it was, it's crazy how you always say, let's watch out for each other. Let's, like, you keep an eye on me, I'll keep an eye on you, right? And still, and even in those days, we were doing that, and yet he just like
slipped through the gap.
Slipped through the crack.
It really does, because you can. Yeah, it's tough, because even with the skis and stuff this day, it's like you organise a crew, and I know a lot of people have been vocal, like Greg, and even like the Walshes when you go to Jaws, right? Like, and you have stuff set up, from experience and moments like that. And like, I have a jet ski at Luca's house. I have my boards at Luca's house, and he has a contact to a boat. And like, we have our little group that every time we go to Mavericks, we've got it pretty down. Jojo and you get out there, and if someone's running safety, like I remember I run safety on a really good swell because my leg was bust up, and I'm meant to be looking after my guys that I'm committed to, but then you see other guys eat so bad shit, and you're like, what happens if I go in and get this guy and miss my guy? And there's this sense of like just guilt, or should I be doing this? Like, I feel guilty because I'm not helping that guy, but what happens if I miss my guy and he gets hurt? So, I mean, even to this day, and that's with all the jet skis and the rescues, it's so easy for someone to, if you have a wave, or someone's got an insane wave, or something else happens, it's taking your focus away from something, and someone else is happening something else. Like, the half an hour can go by really fast, and then you like go out and you're like, oh, I wonder where such and such is, and I haven't seen him get away for a while. And then, perfect example, Sion as well, right? Like, rest in peace, Sion and Mark. Same thing. You just sit there and go, oh, I haven't seen him for a while, and then worst case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like, even nowadays, like even the contest at Jaws, you got 8, 10 water patrol out there. huge set comes, 5 guys go down, and it's like, where is so-and-so? 10 minutes later, you're still like, oh my God, he popped up way over there. And it's just, I mean, that's why it's so important to have your own safety team. And like you said, you have to sort of be responsible for 1 or 2 guys, or just your guy if you're with him. And because it's that critical. Like, so much chaos happens when one of those sets rolls through. And yeah, it's come a long ways for sure with safety, but it's still pretty radical.
Yeah, I think I've thought about it. I think having, and you see everyone wants to go get someone, but I think that creates more chaos. That it's like you got 6 skis going in, and number one, someone's probably going to run the poor guy or girl over, like take him out. So, and then if someone does get him and there's 3 skis around them, like now you're stuck where you can't move, and everyone's not looking at the next wave, or, and I think it creates this chaos where if it's just like, hey, like you're looking after that guy and you're looking after that guy, or a group of guys, and you're responsible for them, it keeps everything a little bit more mellow. And it's not this like Formula One where cars and just zooming everywhere and it's creating, everyone's looking at what's going on. So yeah, I think Bragg has done a good job with their courses and stuff. And I go back to the beauty of growing up with tow surfing with you guys and Laird and Double D and Dave, and that everyone knew how to drive a jet ski, like back then, like with big waves. So you learned how to save someone and do the pickups and all that stuff. And I feel like this day and age, because tow surfing sort of, the paddle movement took over, is a lot of these kids or people growing up haven't had a chance to learn how to drive a jet ski. So even if they're on part of your team, it's like, do you trust them to come and get you, So I think that the good thing with things like Bragg and what Sean Eladio used to do, and Brian and Terry and all those guys, is that you can go out and get the knowledge to be a helpful part of that team.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I was lucky enough to do a course with Ryan Keelana up in Oregon when I first got into it, when we first got skis, because he was training everyone that was involved in the Billabong Oddysey, the movie. And he was amazing. The amount of stuff I learned in like a week hanging out with him was so instrumental in all that.
Yeah. So what's seems like you've had such a I always, it's funny, I always go back to you and Pete Mel together, because I really feel like you guys have been in the surf industry like from a early age. Like Pete his family had the surf shop. His dad was a shaper, and he's worked at Quicksilver, and then he was the commissioner. He's sort of been so involved, and he's a professional surfer, and I feel like I put you in the same boat. Like, what was it like transitioning out of when you went, what, I'm sort of done from chasing these swells or whatever it was, and then moving into that next step, and then eventually being the big wave commissioner too, to helping us guys.
Yeah, well, I there's been a few different times, but I've definitely weaned it down for a long time now. But in 2013, I broke my neck at Ocean Beach pretty good. And I remember on that wipeout just thinking, okay, I really got to back this down if I get out of this one, because my whole body went numb and I barely got to the beach. And it took me about a year to get the movement back in my arm because I had a little bit of nerve damage. And so that was kind of the real light bulb that went off. Like, I can't take another hit like that on a 50-foot wave. And so, I was obviously being really interested in forecasting and super huge fan of what you guys were doing on the Big Wave Tour and watching all the events. And obviously good friends with Pete. And he called me up and said, hey, I've done this for a couple of years. Do you want to have a go at it? So I came back to him and started talking about it. And I said, yeah, this sounds fun. I'd like to do it. I love the forecasting side of it. And I was really, really keen to try to pick the right days for you guys to do your thing. I think that was one of the alluring things, was to work with the guys at Surfline and try to nail the best days. And I'm just a huge fan of it. I like being around it, and seeing what the guys and girls are doing now in the biggest waves. And so it was a big transition for sure. Way more stressful than any other job I've ever had. No doubt. I mean, we did a lot of work together, you being the surfers rep and making those calls, and some heavy moments at Jaws and at Nazare. But it was in the end, it was really rewarding. I think there were some great events happen that I was a part of, and super great time in my life, super grateful for that opportunity. And I just, you know, standing back now and looking at it, I just want to see the Big Wave Tour do well. I want to see young kids have that opportunity still and get a chance to make a living at chasing big waves instead of, you know, not all of them can make the tour and go that route. And there's so many great surfers that wind up being good, you know, like you talk about Luca and kids like that. I would love to see them be able to get a career out of it like we were able to.
Yeah. It seemed like it was a good way to maybe give back, right? Like to sort of give back to, you look back on all those really awesome times, like you said, you know, like just drop of a hat chasing swells around the world. And I sort of say it to my wife sometimes. I'm like, you feel like James Bond, 007, right? When you get the phone call, you're on the computer, you're grabbing your passports and all these different cards, and you're going, you know, into different countries, and you're changing your SIM cards, and you're sort of trying to be secretive to a point, you know, if you're trying to sneak into a swell. And I'm like, you really feel like you're just a spy. It's like you get the phone call, and it's like, okay, I've got to do everything I can to sneak into this swell without being seen and get it done and get back, you know, alive.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And you're right though. When you realize you're going, it's just complete chaos until you're done surfing that day. It's just life's in a whirlwind, chasing airports, cars, whatever, forecasting along the way. Was the wind going to change? Who am I going to align with when I get there? It's really exciting. And then I always thought like the anticipation of a swell was the scariest part. Like the buoys and the night before and like all that stuff is like, that adrenaline's insane. And then when you're actually out surfing really big waves, I feel like that's when, you know, you can start to calm down and just do what your instincts sort of take over. Yeah. But the lead up to that stuff is so stressful.
So stressful. Yeah. Yeah. Some people handle it better than others for sure. And then, so what would you say, Mike, if you look back over, your big wave career, what are a handful of those moments? Obviously, you said Cortez Bank was one, like a special day. Is there any like maybe two or three positive, really good moments that stick out in your mind, and then a couple of like situations that were just like so bad and horrible that you just like making you think like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, for sure. I've been so lucky. I've had like maybe three really defining waves that you know, the two at Cortez, the 2008 wave and the 2001 wave. Those are two waves I'll never forget. But the best wave of my life and the most memorable moment was the wave at Jaws, where it's the opening wave of the Billabong Oddysey, where I got towed in, and it was before drones or anything, and it was shot from a helicopter. That ride where I got into the barrel and got blown through it and felt kind of get lifted in the air. And it was my first day surfing there. And we was during a contest actually, and it was with Brad, and he was, you know, it was just such a great memory. Those three rides were probably the moments I remember. Also, the early days of paddling Todos. Some of those days there was a day with Brock and Todd Chester I remember really well. It was after an eddy swell where we all got really big waves, and it was sunny and glassy, and just those memories of a couple of those drops. And then, I've had a few terrible moments too, where you just wish you really weren't in that situation. I think the Mavericks one, on the Mark Food Day, I got blown through the rocks. That was traumatizing for sure. Definitely, sort of was a rough year after that, trying to get my courage back and build back up, which I was able to do, but that was a life-changing event for sure. The other one was on the day Shane Dorian got his XXL wave at Jaws going left. Ross Clark Jones had ridden the wave, Shane had ridden the wave, and I rode the wave, the third wave of the set going left at Jaws. And the night before, me and Brad were on the cliff, and we were watching, and we were talking about how to drive the ski and how to get picked up after the left. And these guys were out there on like a speedboat way out the back, and they kind of got in the way when Brad was trying to tow me into the wave. They were on like this little boat. I don't know what the hell they were doing out there, but so I had to like almost kind of let go early and skip into this wave. And I got this biggest left of my life, kicked out, was like, oh my God. I was like waiting for him to be right there, and he was nowhere to be found. And a set was coming, and I had the tow board, the vest, and I was caught inside on the left, and I went over the falls backwards, holding onto my toe board, and just got obliterated, and I got pushed into that corner. And to this day, a couple of guys on Maui always tell me, they're like, we were on the cliff watching that. We thought you were going to die. And
that is a bad spot to be. That is a really, really scary spot to be.
It was radical. I thought for sure I was going to drown. I was like, there's no way I'm getting out of this one. I was just wave after wave, and I was so wasted. But a local guy came in and got me finally on the ski. They found me, and he got me through a set around the left, and we got to the outside. But it was funny because what you said about when you're learning and yelling at your partner, I was
about to
screaming
say,
at Brad.
what did you say to Brad? Like, what happened?
That was the most I've ever lit up Brad. I think I said everything I could possibly think of. And then what he said back to me was, well, you didn't get me on the right. So because he got smoked on a right earlier, and another ski had grabbed him. So it's hilarious. But yeah, that was a really bad one. So those two, the Mavericks and that were two of my scarier moments for sure. And then, a few times paddling at Todos, I blew my knee out on a wipeout there. One time the lip landed and crushed through my leg, and I had a really serious wipeout there. But so those are some of the memories of getting pretty worked.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny when I looked at what waves I wanted to sort of dissect with you. Like, it was pretty clear in my mind that it was going to be the two Cortez and the Jaws wave, because that Jaws wave to this day, like, I think if you look on YouTube, it's like millions of views, right? Because it's such a beautiful opening. Like, you see this guy just nearly looks like you're foiling at the start, right? You're just like, it's flat, bump, wind, bumpy, and then it just starts pulling back. Then you're like, oh, he's on a wave. And you're like, oh, he's on a big wave. Oh, he's on a giant wave. And I don't think I ever seen the front view of that wave. Is there a front or a channel view of that wave? Because the way that Brad explains it in making the call, and that's why I brought that up, was so awesome, because it's like, he's like, yep, I'm just going to put him here. I'm just going to put him there. I'm just going to put him there. And he's like, oh, he's like, already, see ya. Like, and then the way that he speaks about it, and he's just like, oh my God, like, Brad's energy and sense of humor. And then he's like, okay, Brad, you haven't surfed. You've got to get a wave. You've got to get yourself together. It's like, oh, it's too funny.
Yeah, there is a front view of that wave that's in that movie, actually. I believe Sonny Miller shot it from the left part of the cliff, so it's kind of behind it a little bit. It's pretty gray, and there's tons of spray, but it does show that the wave really stands up super straight and tall.
That was the Mormai contest show. Is that the same day Garrett got that incredible barrel? Was that the contest day or a different day?
Different day. Garrett got the barrel, but Garrett and his partner won the contest that day. So yeah, that was early days, and the ski we were using was would barely go the speed to match a swell. It was a pretty funny experience. We were in a heat with Buzzy Kerbox, and I knew he'd surfed there a lot, so we were just like, hey, let's just follow Buzzy. Let's go with the wave after him.
Take the first wave of the set and just to track the ski. Because it'd be really cool now. This would be really funny. Is that there's actually an old Wave Runner 3 around the corner from my house. It's right. You've probably seen it. It sits. It's just sits on the guy's yard, and it's like. Yeah. I'm like, it would be so funny now to put guys on that ski and go out and get some waves at Jaws and like go and do the rescues and the pickup after having the machines that everyone has now. Like, it wouldn't be funny. It would sort of
it'd be really bad.
Make sure you feel it.
Super funny. Yeah, we didn't Rodney Kilborn, who was running the event, love Rodney, he's the best guy ever. He's like, come on over, you guys are in it. We've got a ski for you. So we kind of get there and we're like looking around, and and he had his friend and we called him up, and he brought the ski down, and we went, well, this is it. We were going through Maliki Gulch on that ski, and it was closing out both sides of the channel. We're like, oh my God, we barely even got down to Jaws. And then when we pulled up, we saw Laird on like a 60-foot wave, just doing these huge carves. I'll never forget like that, watching Laird on those couple of waves. I'd never seen someone that far advanced from everyone else at tow surfing. Everyone out there was like surviving, and Laird was surfing it like a small wave. It was incredible. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people know how insane Laird is at surfing any type of board, any wave.
Yeah.
Because some people say, oh, why doesn't he paddle in these events and stuff like that? But
Yeah.
He's at that point in time, he was further ahead at coast surfing than anyone I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time with Dave Kalama, like when we were paddling, and I was staying at his house a lot, and he would tell me stories, like straight up. And Dave's such a good guy, and he was just like, it was like Batman and Robin, you know, like Laird was Batman, Dave was Robin, and he just goes, Jamie, I saw some of the most crazy shit ever from that guy in the ocean. He goes, just next level, like, just you would think everyone else would have just died. You know, he just manhandles stuff, and you know he had that big balsa board, and he was probably 220, and he just, you know, we all know Jaws. Like even when it's glassy, it's still windy and bumpy, but when it's 20 knot trades and you're on a 60-foot wave, like you understand why people are just surviving. Like you're just trying to go over the moguls, but he was just so like connected and big and strong that he just plowed through that stuff like snowboarding. It was pretty radical.
Yeah, it was fun to be with Brad because we'd never seen surfing like that, and we were just like, oh my god, like that is we went home so amped to try to get better boards and figure out what he was riding. And Laird and Dave were really cool to us, and so was Double D, because we went there a lot on like kind of every swell, and those guys, they really took a liking to Brad, and because he made them laugh, I suppose, and they sort of let me tag along. So I felt pretty lucky that we got in there with those guys, and we got a lot of days out there, and it was a pretty special time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's a cool story to finish on. But I have five questions I've been asking the guys, and so the first one, obviously, the best big wave in the world.
Jaws,
yeah. Scariest, heaviest?
For me, Mavericks.
Yeah. Well, you had that experience out there. What's one wave that you haven't surfed that you would either love to surf or you would have loved to surf in your prime?
I've surfed it once, but the wave that intrigues me is Pico Alto. I think it's a perfect wave in Peru. I got it like 10 feet. I'd love to get that on like a 15, 18-foot day. Incredible long wall, like almost like Sunset, but glassy. And that's a wave that's really intrigued me. I think most of my favorite big waves I've been able to surf.
Yeah, and it's sort of, we had a contest there. It was actually about that size, and it actually has like nearly like the Mavs double section. You know, it comes in, you get over that, and then you drop in again and get the second one. So, yeah, cool. What do you think the most underrated big wave in the world is?
I'm going to say Todos, just because I spent so much time there, and it doesn't get a lot of
attention.
You know, but like you said, it's so rare that the West Swell days where it gets that big. And it's been a long time, but you know, if you match it up around the world, I think it holds its own with anywhere.
It does. I can attest to that, and it's heavy. And then the next big wave discovery. You know, I always go back to like you know, Nazaré just burst onto the scene. I mean, I know there's so much coastline, and but I wonder your point of view where you think the next, say, Nazaré is going to be.
Well, I'm intrigued with like southern Chile just because of the size of the storms, and every time I look on the swell map, and you got those roaring 40s and the size of the storms, and you see what hits down there. I imagine it's really almost similar to New Zealand in a way, where it's hard to get the weather because you get such raw, huge waves. But I have to imagine there's a wave or two down there that's something out of this world because you get those size swells.
Yeah, I mean, look at what it does to Porto. Like how far away it is from Porto. Porto's 20 feet, and it gets the remnants of it, and that thing's hitting that thing front on like with full steam.
Yeah.
So I think that whole South American coastline is. But you know, the beauty of it is that it's so raw and rugged and inaccessible that we may never know. And that's. But I'm sure Ramon's onto it somewhere.
But I'm sure Ramon knows one or two. But that's the beauty of it, right? That it's probably almost impossible to find a wave like that. I mean, but we would have thought that about Cortez, because most of the days are windy out there, and so there's got to be another Cortez somewhere that's out there. Yeah,
awesome. Well, Mike, thanks for joining, mate. I had a great time. I love getting the information from you guys with so much experience, and Thanks for everything you've done for big wave surfing, you know, for us guys right now in the future. You've been real supportive and we really appreciate it. So thanks for being on the Late Drop.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate being on it with you, and good luck in all the events when they happen, and keep doing what you're doing. It's awesome to watch.
Thanks, brother.
Take care, buddy.